proposed legislation will introduce quotas on the total number of documented foreign nationals with work visas that can be employed in the major economic sectors such as agriculture, hospitality and tourism, construction. You can mention a number of them. So this policy will be implemented by also small business intervention and enforcement of a list of sectors where foreign nationals cannot be allocated business visas and amendments to the Small Business Act to limit foreign nationals establishing SMMEs and trading in some sectors of our economy. The Department of Home Affairs is also reviewing the current legislation and strengthening the Border Management Authority to secure the porous borders and allow for the orderly movement of the people and other nationals through the ports of entry only. From the side of my department, together with all the relevant authorities, we are stepping up inspections to enforce existing labor and immigration legislation. Secondly, a correction there, it's Home Affairs, not higher education and training. They have, Home Affairs released a list of scarce skills and critical skills in high demand to provide guidance to all institutions to prioritize education and training interventions in those areas. The list will be used as a last resort to allow foreign nationals in possession of the listed skills that the economy requires and where job offers have been made to be allocated work visas. The government will impose various obligations on both the employer and the foreign national to transfer skills to locals, and permits will be limited to specific durations. But we must add that this skills list was drafted and researched by the higher education, although it's published by Home Affairs. Thirdly, South Africa is a signatory to international treaties and conventions governing the rights of migrants and refugees. All policies and interventions were developed within the ambit of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, and government will ensure the protection of migrants and their families in accordance with the international standards and the guidelines. Fourthly, South Africa will also implement these initiatives within the context of the regional integration and cooperation imperatives that have been agreed. These have been agreed to at the SADC level, the Southern African Development Community, and at the level of the African Union. So the National Labour Migration Policy goes hand in hand with a proposed Employment Services Amendment Bill, providing the policy framework and the legal basis to regulate the extent to which employers can employ foreign nationals in their establishments, whilst protecting the rights of the migrants. Our argument is very simple. Given our constitution, given our basic conditions of employment, all workers have rights, regardless of where they come from. The proposed amendments to the Employment Services Act of 2014 aims to limit the extent to which employers can employ the number of foreigners in possession of a valid work visa in their employment, and codifies the implications of the employer engaging foreign nationals to promote, amongst others, only employ foreign nationals entitled to work in terms of the Immigration Act, the Refugee Act, or any other provision. B is to ascertain the foreign national is entitled to work in the Republic in the relevant position, satisfy themselves that there are no South Africans with the requisite skills to fill that vacancy, prepare a skills transfer plan where appropriate, employ foreign nationals on the same terms as local workers. This has been a very, very sensitive area where the labor market has been distorted, where people have been exploiting the poor migrants who are very desperate, giving them very low wages, and no conditions of employment are attached to that, or benefits which they are supposed to enjoy. And they must retain copies of relevant documentation. So the proposed amendment bill proposes a framework that will enable the minister to set quotas for employment of foreign nationals. A quota may apply in respect of a sector of the economy, an occupational category, or a geographical area. The minister will establish a quota in a sector after consultation with the Employment Services Board and after considering public comments. So in summary, this national labor migration policy aims to achieve a balance between the following areas. A, the population's expectations regarding the accessibility to work to South Africans, given worsening unemployment and the perception that undocumented foreigners are distorting the labor market access. And B, South Africa's labor market needs, in particular, the need for critical skills not locally available. C, the protection of migrant workers and their families in accordance with the international standards and guidelines. D, the regional integration and cooperation imperatives. South Africa, we're not an island. We are cooperating with SADC, with the AU, and a number of other countries, the number of trade agreements which we have signed. So all those have to be taken into consideration. Thank you very much. And then there will be a presentation which will be done on this by the DDG Sam Murotoba, who has been leading this particular research. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, and good afternoon, colleagues. I'm going to be brief on the presentation because the Minister covered the details. Just to give you the context and the work that we did. We were led by the Interministerial Committee, which was appointed by the President. And because migration issues cuts across a number of departments, we are just one component. The slide shows you the total number of ministries, 12 of them. And later on, we identified defense and public works as necessary departments because they deal with the border part and also the fencing and so on. So this was the list of ministers that led this process. We also had the assistance of the ILO and Professor Olivier, who is a well-known guru in migration, who is also connected minister from overseas, and he is participating in the live stream. And this IMC was given an instruction by the President to look at treaties, like the Minister said, the aspects of the labor and employment, and various sectors of the economy, and most importantly, uphold the Constitution and the relevant statutes. Now, you will know that migration, there are pull and push factors that are leading people to leave. And various scholars in migration will tell you a whole range of issues around migration. It's a very complex, sensitive, something that, if not handled properly, can result into all sorts of unnecessary challenges and the kind of things that we are seeing also in our country. Just on the numbers, Stats SA, when they do migration, they reflect on migration internally and externally. Now, labor laws are national, and we are not worried about the people's, that is migration from Limpopo to Gauteng and so on. This is about foreign nationals coming from outside of the borders. Now, estimates that they did up to 2017, and we're looking at the current census, projected that we will be sitting with about 4 million migrants in the country. And if you look at a number of push factors or documentation that we have, working with Home Affairs, we're able to identify a number of red spots. One of them is the special dispensation, which has also been extended to Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Angola, which continues to attract quite a number of people, and we are forced to house them locally. The other one, which is a major problem, is the overstayers of people who come into the country. For instance, in 2019-20, 15.5 million people were recorded as having entered the country, and 13.9 returned, and which means that 1.6 million remained in the country, and they continue to be illegal. Now, they published statistics from 2016-17 to 2019-20, giving you just the trends in terms of people coming into the country and those departing, and the overstayers. And if you look at the column, you will notice that 2016-17 we had 1.6 million. 2017 up to 18 we had 1.4 million. 18-19 we had 1.7 million. 19-20 we have 1.6 million people that are not living. And Home Affairs has this good map that shows you the porous areas of our borders, and that is why we have the Border Management Authority that is looking at interventions to try and address that problem, because that's where we are experiencing an inflow all the way from Africa. But the problem is not only limited to that. If you look at the entire Africa, and there's a website that you can also visit yourself, within the whole African continent, South Africa is attracting the highest, or is currently housing the largest number of migrants at 2.9 million. We are talking about documented. Now, the situation becomes worse when you include the undocumented. Both the Stats SA, UNDSA, this is the United Nations Department of Economics, they currently estimate 4% of the population to be migrants and about 7% to be labor force. And if you look at other countries that are closer to us, it's only Cote d'Ivoire, Uganda, Sudan, Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Kenya in terms of the inflow of migrants. But they have got very strict, I think the minister talked about legislation in the neighborhood. You can visit their website and look at what countries like Swaziland, Namibia, Botswana, and so on did in terms of legislation, which is much more stricter than what we are doing. And I think the minister talks about the policy context. This is one of the 9 sub-themes of the national employment policy that we're working on, and labor migration is something that we've started since 2017. We're looking at a number of issues to address unemployment, and I think the rest of the presentation covers aspects that the minister raised. It's just that in the presentation we give you more detail, the rationale, the context, and key interventions. I'll go to the last slide on the consultation. For us to release this policy, you have to go through very, very extensive process. After research, after consultations at government level, we have processes of clusters that we have to go through. We have what we call the socio-economic impact analysis. We have to get clearance from the state law advisors to check the constitutionality of the bill and so on. Now, this is what took us so long, because we had to process all those issues. And currently, we are at number 10, where today starting from today, we are going to be embarking on a public consultation process. Thereafter, in May, June, we'll go to NEDLEC, and depending on the extent of comments and amendments, we may go back to Cabinet in July, and then we will then go to Parliament. The format of our consultations will take roundtables, where we will be led by the Employment Services Board, and we will engage academics, international organizations, etc. The minister will also host a number of sessions with key stakeholders that we believe are very strategic, like embassies and so on. We'll have provincial consultations, one per province, but Gauteng, Eastern Cape and Western Cape, we hope to have 2 or so. And our provincial office will also assist us in dealing with local sessions, and we'll have NEDLEC Portfolio Committee. The documents are available on the website of the department. Thank you, Sabe.
Thank you very much, Minister and DDGs. Colleagues, we'll take questions from the floor and other questions from WhatsApp. We are also having the Office of the Minister of Home Affairs, CEO is at the back, so that we are able to share this as part of the process of government. Colleagues, can you show by the hand? I have one hand. From your side, Vanessa? It's fine. Please introduce your ma'am, and then yourself, ma'am, and we'll proceed with the questions.
I think we were expecting a lengthier briefing, but anyway. Minister, I would like to ask you your remarks with regards to Operation Dudula. Many are saying that it's inappropriate what is going on, but the operation clearly speaks for itself. It wants South Africans to be employed and to root out a lot of the illegal activities that are going on in some of the areas, especially here in Gauteng. What is your response to this? And also, what is your response to political parties going to businesses to establish how many South Africans versus migrants are working in these various sectors, especially in the restaurant sector? And also, with regards to the trucking industry, we do understand that there is currently a memorandum that's being handed over, but clearly this is an issue that's bubbling under and has not been addressed. So, as the Minister of Labour, what is your response to all of these three? Thank you.
Before Minister responds, any question from WhatsApp, social media?
Someone is typing at the moment. The question will come through.
It's fine. Let Minister respond to the 3 questions, then we'll take the questions as they come. Thanks.
The first one, Operation Dudula. I just want to urge South Africans not to engage in, no matter what their feeling is, in relation to these issues. They have the right to protest, but not to engage in illegal activities and even violence. So we can't condone what they are doing and getting into the areas and forcing their way through. It's not acceptable. But remember that the JPS cluster is handling this particular matter, because once it becomes the way it is, it doesn't become just a labor issue. it goes beyond that. So they are dealing with this particular matter. That's the same with the trucks, the truck drivers. All the way we have been engaging with the truck drivers. Sam, you will confirm, would have an average of 2 meetings per month with the truck drivers and engaging them on this process we're talking about. As late as last week, I was speaking to the General Secretary about the release of the document today. And he welcomed that. They are looking forward to making input into this particular document as part of the public comment. Sometimes we are shocked about their tactics after we've been into several meetings with them. Because what we are not going to do is to do things arbitrary. We will have to follow the legal processes, and this is a process which we are following. We hear that they talk about 0% of foreign drivers because they are not a critical skill. But there's a reality here. There are people who were employed long ago. What are you going to do with those people? We have contracts, we have rights. But there are also people who are legal in this country, who might be refugees. And according to the international obligations, the refugees have a right to be able to do something for their living, including looking for work, as long as it's done in a legal way. So what we're not going to accept is the disruption of the economy when people have been given the platforms to deal with the issues. And I must raise this. Maybe Mr. Mkalipe would like to talk to it. These unions of the truck drivers, we've been trying in the various forums to persuade them to register their membership, to register as unions, so that they can come to the bargaining table. We've gone out of our way to persuade the bargaining chamber to make certain concessions for them to be able to act with the other organized unions who are in the bargaining chamber. But they've refused. They said they are representing the employed and the unemployed, therefore they are not a trade union. Then we ask them, how are you going to negotiate the conditions of service for your own members? So we sit in forums, we agree on the way forward, and sometimes they go out and become disruptive. We're not very sure what their agenda is. But we still say people have the right to demonstrate, to raise their feelings, but not in violence. We will continue engaging them. We are expecting them that they will make an input to this process as we are finalizing the issue of the quotas. And I must put it very clearly. In terms of the law, we can't ban the employment of the foreign nationals. It will not allow us. This constitution of this country will not allow us to do. We can limit it and control it. That's what we are trying to do. Oh, yes, yes. Well, I've been very clear on that. On the issue of the illegal inspections, I've been very clear. There are certain protocols which you have to follow when you do inspections, including our own officials. You don't just rock up in a workplace and say, I've come to do an inspection. You give a notice on the issues which you'll be looking for, and you allow the employer to prepare the necessary documentation which you will be needing when you come to that particular workplace. In fact, for the political parties to do that, it's disruptive. rocking up in a workplace, disrupting the production, I think it's irresponsible. What we expect is that the politicians should be the first to respect the law. We have the law in this country, how inspection has to be conducted. So even us, as the body with those powers, we have to follow the law and give the necessary notices. We go for once, we make follow-ups if we've made recommendations and see if they've been implemented. But there is one reality that when people want to whip emotions for political gain, they start these irresponsible acts. That's what informs them. It's populism. So such populist actions have no place in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Do we have any questions from the WhatsApp groups? Vanessa, over to you.
There's a question from Andy Siwe wants to know the name of the DDG who explained the presentation.
Can you repeat?
Andy Siwe, what is the name of the DDG's name? The one who explained the presentation.
It's Mr. Sam Marotoba.
That's the only question, Chair. Thank you.
Fine. Any further questions, ENC? Any further questions from colleagues before we give Mr. Mkalipi to explain a few things? Over to you, Mr. Mkalipi.
Thank you, Minister and colleagues. My colleague Sam has explained the process of consultation. The bill is published now. It's open for comment. We'll receive comment. We'll collate the comment. We'll then take further the consultation. I think one other issue that we wanted to indicate that I'm sure all of you know that there's a strike in Clover that has been going on for 3 months now. And workers unemployed, the company losing profit. We met with the parties last night, around about 8, to discuss 2 things. One, to get a commitment from all the parties involved that violence has got no place in collective bargaining. Social dialogue should be peaceful, and there should be no violence and intimidation. And the second issue is we met with them to try and see what are the chances of settling this dispute to solve this problem once and for all. And those discussions are taking place. We're meeting again today at 4 with all the parties, with the conciliators being involved to see whether can we solve this problem once and for all. We hope it will be solved tonight. We hope, crossing our fingers. But we'll see. Thank you, Minister.
Colleagues, noting that there are no further questions, we will allow you.
Because I'm the only one here, I'm going to take the opportunity. Minister, you said something that was interesting, and maybe I heard wrong, but you're saying that you've been trying to engage with the unions with regards to the issue regarding the trucks and the truck drivers. So my question to you is, they clearly don't want to speak, and there's clearly a broader issue here. So I just want to understand, and it's not working. Is this one working? Okay. Okay, well, you can hear me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I just want to understand, is there no plan for a different approach or further intervention? Because even with Operation Dudula, I'm seeing people now on social media saying the media is obsessed with Operation Dudula, and it's the first question that we're asking, and they're not going anywhere. But it's not that we're obsessed. We're just trying to understand that it reaches crisis mode in this country before something's actually done. So I just want to know if there's a different approach to addressing the trucking industry issue other than just trying to sit around the table and talk, because clearly they don't want to, and that South Africans, especially young South Africans, are fed up. There are no jobs, and they just don't know what to do anymore. So I just want to know from you, Minister, your perspective, is there no other way to try and solve this problem?
We'll indeed take that as a last question. Minister will respond to that question and make closing remarks, colleagues. Over to you, Minister.
Maybe a rhetorical question is, what would be the different approach? Except to call all the parties and engage with them on their issues. That's what we've been doing. But the issue is linked to the crisis of unemployment. And I think the president, in the State of the Nation, and a follow-up from the different ministers, have been able to talk about a package of measures to intervene in the economy in order to create more jobs. We've talked about mass public employment programs, localization, industrialization, the massive infrastructure build. We've talked about all those programs, which are a package which was negotiated also with the network partners. And now what is left is the implementation of that particular program. So this matter relates to the employment. Whilst we're negotiating with the unions to say there are various platforms where their issues have to be addressed, the government is continuing with what I would call the issue of increasing employment in the country. You know where we're coming from. Even prior to COVID, the economy was going down. Come COVID, lockdowns, a lot of jobs were lost. Some of the companies have been able to come back, some have not. You know the violence and the destruction which we saw last year in July in KZN and in Gauteng. People lost lots of jobs. And when we're recovering from this COVID-19, then came was it the fourth wave, the Omicron. So it's a reality. But despite that, the government has presented a credible plan, which is dealing with the issue of job creation. At the center of that, it's economic growth and job creation. Because if the economy does not grow, you're not going to be able to create the jobs. So that's the approach which we are using. But also, violence has to be dealt with very sternly. We can't accept violence. We can't accept blocking of the main arteries of this country, which are supplying goods and services to the whole country or even to the SADC countries and other parts of the continent. That will not be accepted. So the approach which we are having is to look at the strategy of increasing the jobs. And very clearly that program which has been presented, which has been welcomed by all, led by the president, also negotiated with the unions, we think if it's properly implemented, is going to give us the jobs, because part of the tension relates to the scramble for the resources, scramble for jobs. But it has to be done in a right way, in a constructive way. We are a human rights-based country in our constitution and even in our laws. Thank you.
Colleagues, we have come to the end of our briefing. Thank you very much for honoring the briefing, unless Minister wants to have the last word.
The last word?
Yes, Minister.
To say what?
To
Maybe
please.
to say, if I have my last word. This public consultation, insofar and subject to correction, they are going to take 90 days. Yes. It's 90 days to allow for this extensive consultation.
Sorry, Minister.
They want to hear me.
Sorry.
Ayivakali mani le.
The mic.
Sorry.
Mikro. I was saying the public consultations will take a maximum of 90 days to allow for that extensive and widespread reach of all the interested parties. And my interest and a clarion call to our people is to make sure that they participate in this process. And they must avoid violent and threatening actions, which sometimes are led by political opportunists. This is an opportunity for all to come to the party and we regulate this complex matter, because it's a complex matter. And I want to repeat what Mr. Morotoba said, the DDG. It's a balance of the expectations of our people, the international conventions we've signed, we are party to, be it at the ILO, at the United Nations, at the AU, at SADC. We need to balance all those. By the way, countries like Zimbabwe, like Botswana, like Nigeria, they've ring-fenced certain areas for their citizens. Nobody else is allowed either to trade or to be imported to do the job in those areas. But with us, we have to balance it with all these international obligations and our constitution in particular. So we are calling upon all to come into the party. We have created a platform now, which is for engagement. And we will go out, talk to our people, listen to their views, pull them together, and then come up with a final product. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. That was the end of the briefing. Thank you. Vanessa?
Sorry, Chair, there's one more question.
Okay, because it's one question, I'll give it. It's definitely the last question. Thanks.
It's a question from Romain Hansen from Radio France International. There's a perception that foreign nationals are distorting labor market access. Does it mean that the government agrees with this public perception? And where does this perception come from?
What do we mean by that? Employers decide in certain sectors which we have mentioned, go on your own into the restaurants here in South Africa. You will see what's going to happen. There are restaurants where 100% of the people employed in those restaurants are foreign nationals. What's the reason for that? You go into the farms. So we can mention a number of, you go into the security. The reason for that is because the employers, they know that those workers will not fight for their rights. They are exploiting these desperate workers and give them anything. If there are agreements in terms of the collective agreements, those workers just for survival purposes, even if they are supposed to say take 50 rand an hour, they will be ready to take 10 rands an hour. And what the employers do is to want those who are ready to take anything which has not been determined. That's distorting the labor market. That's what we are saying. But it's not those workers who are distorting the labor market. It's the practice of the employers who want to continue exploiting those workers, knowing that those workers are desperate, they will take anything. That's why our argument is, if you employ them legally, you must be able to give them all the necessary rights and the benefits which are equal to what we are giving to the locals. Because if you don't do that, you are distorting the labor market. That's what we are saying.
Colleagues, we are indeed done. If there are further questions, we have highly capable senior officials, DDGs who are here. We'll take the further interviews on radio and TV. But for now, because we have other commitments, thank you very much for honoring this briefing. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay.